This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Nancy Benson. This week, Big Chicken, how antibiotics make chickens large and cheap. But at what price?
The problem with antibiotic resistance emerging is that we've always been able to rely on a new drug to come along to save us, and there are no new drugs anymore.
Cheap chickens and antibiotics when Radio Health Journal returns.
With many opportunities to celebrate during fall and winter, preparing foods for all the festive occasions can be both a joy and a challenge. Selecting basic foods that can work in multiple ways, such as fresh grapes, can simplify things greatly. According to registered dietitian Courtney Romano, health advisor to the California Table Grape Commission.
Fresh grapes are inherently beautiful. They taste great and are easy to keep around for everyday eating as well as special occasions. Keep them on hand for a simple and healthy snack option. Arrange them in a pretty bowl for a classic and edible centerpiece, or in small clusters to adorn a serving platter. Use them as a special ingredient. Heart-healthy grapes can be dipped in dark chocolate for a delightful dessert that is good for you, too.
Heart-healthy grapes from California are in season from May through January. Grapes of all colors, red, green, and black, are a natural source of beneficial antioxidants and other polyphenols, which may help contribute to heart health. Visit grapesfromcalifornia.com for more information.
There once was a time, decades ago, when Americans rarely ate chicken. Hard to imagine, right? Because today, chicken is the biggest selling meat in the United States. But it's true, before the end of World War II, people rarely ate chicken. They might keep a few hens in the backyard for eggs and butcher a rooster in the spring, but that's about it. A series of innovations in the 1940s changed all that.
And the first is the invention of the electric incubator, which allows people to take hens away from brooding eggs and gives them extra sort of months of production out of her, and not coincidentally takes egg production from a backyard enterprise of women, the thing that gave them butter and egg money, to an industrialized preserve of men.
That's Maren McKenna, author of Big Chicken, the incredible story of how antibiotics created modern agriculture and changed the way the world eats.
Then there's the achievement of synthetic vitamins, which allows birds to be held in closed barns over the winter when they can't get sunlight and bugs and so forth. And then there's growth promoter antibiotics, which is this invention at the start of the antibiotic era, just as we're starting to give antibiotics to humans to cure infections, which is giving tiny doses of antibiotics to animals that are not sick, that are not suffering from infections, in order to increase their growth, to make them either gain weight more rapidly or to gain more weight on a smaller amount of feed. And it's that innovation that really jumpstarts what we think of as the modern chicken industry, because everything else flows from that. The impulse to keep more and more birds and secondarily cattle and pigs in farms, the ability to protect them from the consequences of being held so closely because we're giving them antibiotics to protect against disease threats.
Sounds pretty good for producers, but there's a problem with that. As McKenna explains, bacteria are amazingly quick in adapting to their environment.
What happens when you give those antibiotics to animals is they affect bacteria in the gut, the contents of the gut microbiome. They change them so that they take up nutrition better from their feed, but at the same time, some of the bacteria become resistant to antibiotics. That is, they learn to defend themselves against the attack of the antibiotics that would be sent to kill them, which makes sense because antibiotics are our synthetic versions of the chemical weapons that bacteria have used against each other since the dawn of time.
And sometimes those resistant bacteria make their way to our dinner table.
So those newly resistant bacteria exit the animals in their manure, or they are still present in the animals' guts when the animals are slaughtered. So at slaughter, some of the gut contents gets on the meat. And so those resistant bacteria travel with the meat into packaging, into our home kitchens, into restaurant kitchens, and either remain on the meat if it's not cooked to the surface of the temperature of the surface of the sun, or it contaminates other parts of a kitchen and then gets to us later. Or in manure, those resistant bacteria pass into the environment, and through groundwater and storm runoff and dust on the wind and the feet of insects are very widely disseminated far away from farms. Not just the whole bacteria, but also the resistance DNA that those bacteria contain. If the bacteria die or are killed, the DNA that confers resistance can be picked up by other bacteria, which then kind of stack up resistance factors within themselves, like assembling cards in a hand of poker.
What this means is that antibiotics that once fought unhealthy bacteria in our own bodies are no longer effective fighting infection. As recently as the year 2000, researchers were able to keep up with resistant bacteria by creating new forms of antibiotics. But McKenna says those little bugs are now outstripping us, leaving us with little in our arsenal to combat them.
We have drugs. We send the drugs against the bacteria become resistant to the drug, and then what we need is a new drug. So there's this constant sort of game of leapfrog or whack-a-mole going on in which the bugs and drugs leap ahead of each other. The problem is, now in the 21st century, after decades of this, the bugs have leapt ahead because we are running out of drugs. And the reason for that is that resistance emerges so efficiently that manufacturers of antibiotics have started to say to themselves and to their shareholders that making antibiotics is not a smart business decision. If you look at new drug approvals at the FDA, there are multiple approvals of new antibiotics in the 60s, the 70s, a few in the 80s, a few in the 90s, and after the year 2000, it's like falling off a cliff. So the problem with antibiotic resistance emerging is that we've always been able to rely on a new drug to come along to save us, and there are no new drugs anymore.
Today, however, some chicken producers have voluntarily stopped using antibiotics in chicken feed due to public demand. Many consumers just don't want to eat chicken raised on antibiotics. But McKenna says health isn't the only reason.
At the start of the book, I talk about eating a chicken in France and how different it was. And I went in search of what made that chicken so different. And it turned out that it's raised under a government program in which chickens are raised in a manner that we would consider free range or pastured, that is completely antibiotic free, that is birds of a different genetic strain than we have here in the United States, that are allowed to, scratch up bugs and flap up into trees and exercise, and also are allowed to live longer. And all of those things that those chickens do and that are provided to them make them taste very different than an American chicken. They make them actually have a taste.
However, in other parts of the developing world, chicken industries are just starting to use antibiotics as much as farmers did in the United States decades ago.
Particularly in the very large economies of the developing world, Brazil, India, China. Brazil is already one of the largest producers of industrially raised chicken on the planet. And India and China, as their economies improve, their residents want to eat meat. It's one of the most reliable signals of a rising economy is that meat sales increase. Because they don't have infinite amounts of land, they are turning to the industrial scale models that we built in the United States, which were heavily dependent on antibiotics. And it's really incumbent on the world now to teach the developing economies that if they are going to raise meat in the manner that we did, they have to forego the stage of using antibiotics in the same way. Because already superbugs are moving across the world, emerging from India and China, some of them with very clear roots in antibiotic misuse. And they are permeating Western Europe, and they have traveled to North America, and they're making people sick in the United States. Bacteria don't respect borders.
So how can you, as an individual, make a difference, other than becoming a vegetarian?
As much as I admire vegetarianism for its respect for the planet and for its ethical basis, I don't think meat eating is ever going to go away. And so I feel that our task is to improve it in animal welfare, in antibiotic use, in land use, in pollution, as much as we can. My ask of people is that when they buy meat, they look for antibiotic-free meat because it makes such a difference to have those producers supported. And that can be anywhere from a very small pasture-based producer to a very large company like Purdue.
You can learn more about Maren McKenna and her book, Big Chicken, by visiting our website at radiohealthjournal.net. Our writer-producer this week is Polly Hansen. Our production director is Sean Waldron. I'm Nancy Benson.
Radio Health Journal returns with medical notes in just a moment.
Hepatocellular carcinoma, or HCC, is the most common type of liver cancer and the fastest growing cause of cancer death in the United States. Despite this, a new survey conducted by Bristol Myers Squibb in collaboration with Blue Ferry, the Adrian Wilson Liver Cancer Association, revealed that 90% of caregivers of liver cancer patients wish there was more public awareness of the seriousness of a liver cancer diagnosis, and 77% think it doesn't get as much attention as other cancers. Andrea Wilson is president and founder of Blue Fairy.
Before my sister was diagnosed with HCC, I thought the only cause of liver cancer was alcoholism. These survey findings reinforce the need for greater awareness of liver cancer and also for more resources to help support caregivers and patients.
To help address the needs caregivers identified in the survey, Bristol Myers Squibb and Blue Fairy have launched livercanceroutlook.com, a website with information about the disease and links to patient and caregiver resources. For more information, visit livercanceroutlook.com.
Medical notes this week. We're all familiar with advertisements for prescription pharmaceuticals that contain a long list of side effects and potential risks. The FDA is considering shortening those requirements, and 2 new studies agree that it's a good idea. The papers in the journals Nature Human Behavior and Cardio Brief find that listing all those adverse side effects has the opposite effect of what's intended. A long list waters down perception and makes drugs seem less dangerous than when only a few serious side effects are detailed. You'd think that exercising a lot would make you more healthy, but a new study in Mayo Clinic Proceedings says maybe not. The study finds that young white men who exercise more than 7.5 hours a week are 86% more likely to have a plaque buildup in their arteries in middle age than men who exercised a lot less. That risk was not present in black men. Researchers say they're surprised. So far, they're at a loss to explain it. If you have digestive issues, maybe you should eat more broccoli. A study in the Journal of Functional Foods shows that mice who ate broccoli along with their regular diet were better able to tolerate digestive issues similar to leaky gut and colitis. However, the bad news is that it took the human equivalent of more than 3 cups of broccoli per day to produce the effect. Researchers say a different variety of broccoli might be able to do the job with a little less. And finally, automakers have loaded all kinds of apps onto your dashboard screen, so you don't have to look at your phone while you drive. But a study by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety says they've gone overboard. There's so much infotainment that the dashboard has become just as distracting as your phone. Programming a destination into GPS is rated most distracting. If you're driving while you do it, you could travel the length of 4 football fields before you're done. And that's Medical Notes this week.
Thank you for listening to Radio Health Journal, a production of MediaTrax Communications. If you enjoyed this week's show, please leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. You can find more Radio Health Journal stories about health, science, and technology on iTunes, Stitcher, and at radiohealthjournal.net.